When Solon was writing the first laws of Athens, a foreigner came to watch him work. His name was Anacharsis. He was a Scythian, a nomad from the plains north of the Black Sea, from a people the Greeks considered barbarians. He read what Solon was writing, and he laughed. Written laws, he told him, are like spiderwebs. They will hold the small and the weak who blunder into them. The rich and the powerful will tear straight through. Plutarch says Solon answered that laws work when keeping an agreement serves both sides better than breaking it. Anacharsis, apparently, went on laughing. Today, 4 stories about what people do when the law is too slow, too expensive, too distant, or when it simply refuses. 4 courts that were not courts. Risto here, history buff, not historian. English isn't my first language. That's kind of the point. Learn a little, laugh a little. That's the deal. Human nature doesn't change, and neither does the plot. History rhymes and keeps the receipts. We start in Athens, in the 5th century before the Common Era, in the same city 100 years after Solon. Once a year, in the middle of winter, the assembly asked itself a single question. Does anyone need to go? Not, has anyone committed a crime? Not, is anyone guilty? Simply, is there someone we would rather not have here anymore? If the assembly voted yes, a date was set. About 2 months later, the citizens gathered in the marketplace. Each man brought a broken piece of pottery, a shard, an ostrakon, the cheapest writing surface in the ancient world, and scratched a name on it. There was no accusation, there was no trial, there were no witnesses, no evidence, no speech for the defense. The man being voted on did not have to be told he was being voted on. He could not answer because there was no charge to answer. If the required quorum was reached and one name prevailed, the man had 10 days to leave Attica. He stayed away for 10 years, and then, at the end of it, he came home. His property had not been touched. His family had not been harmed. His citizenship was intact. He had not been convicted of anything because there had been nothing to convict him of. We have found thousands of these shards. They are in the museums of Athens. You can read the names scratched into them, sometimes in a confident hand, sometimes in the wobbling letters of a man who could barely write. Some of them have been found in stacks, prepared in advance, all in the same handwriting. Somebody was handing them out. Plutarch tells a story about the vote that exiled Aristides, a man so upright that Athens had nicknamed him the Just. On the day of the vote, a citizen who could not write and did not recognize him handed him a shard and asked him to put a name on it. Aristides asked which name. Aristides, said the man. Aristides asked him what Aristides had ever done to him. Nothing at all, the man said. I have never even met him. I am simply tired of hearing him called the Just. Aristides wrote his own name on the shard and handed it back. He was exiled that year. 2 years later, Xerxes crossed into Greece with the largest army the Mediterranean had ever seen, and Athens issued a decree recalling every man it had banished. Aristides came home early. He fought at Salamis. He was one of the Athenian commanders at Plataea. And when the Greek cities of the east wanted to pool their treasure against Persia, they asked that it be held by the man they trusted most. The city had exiled him for being too just. Then it sent for him because it needed someone just. It was not a punishment. Athens had invented something stranger, a legal procedure for getting rid of a man without accusing him of anything. A divorce granted to a city from one of its own citizens.
The second story does not happen in one place. It happens in thousands of villages across most of Europe for roughly 6 centuries. A widower of 60 marries a girl of 19. A wife is seen beating her husband. A woman marries again 3 months after burying her first husband. A man takes a bride from the next valley. None of these things is a crime. No law has been broken. No court in the kingdom will hear a word about any of it. So the village holds its own session. It begins after dark. The young men of the parish gather outside the house with cooking pots, cowbells, hunting horns, kettles, whistles, and anything else that makes a noise no one could mistake for music. In France, they called it a charivari. In England, rough music. In parts of the West Country, a skimmington ride, where an effigy of the offender, or sometimes the offender himself, was paraded through the streets, seated backwards on a donkey, facing the tail. The noise went on for hours. It came back the next night, and the night after. There was one way to end it. The householder came out, acknowledged the crowd, and paid, usually in wine, sometimes in coin. The money went to drink, the noise stopped. The matter was closed, and nobody mentioned it again. The church condemned it. Local ordinances banned it repeatedly, which tells us how well the bans worked. It crossed the Atlantic with French settlers and was still being practiced in rural Quebec in the 20th century. The rule it enforced was never written down anywhere, because everybody already knew it. A village is a machine with a certain number of moving parts, and when somebody puts a part back in the wrong place, the machine makes a noise. The third story is English, and it is the strangest of the 4. In 18th century England, legal divorce existed. In theory. To dissolve a marriage, you needed a private act of Parliament, an individual law debated and passed by the legislature of the country concerning your specific marriage. It cost hundreds of pounds. Between 1700 and 1857, fewer than 300 were granted in total. For a farm labourer, earning perhaps £20 a year, it was not expensive. It was imaginary. So they built their own. The husband led his wife to the market, a public place, on a market day, with a crowd. Around her waist or her neck, he tied a halter, the kind used for livestock. He announced that she was for sale. Sometimes the market official collected the customary toll charged on the sale of an animal and issued a receipt. Then the bidding started. Someone bought her. Money changed hands in front of witnesses. Everyone went to the public house afterwards, and the drink was paid for out of the sale. Almost always, the buyer was already known. He was the man she had been living with, or intended to live with. The price was frequently a shilling, or 5, or a token sum agreed beforehand. There are cases where the wife negotiated the terms herself, and cases where she refused a bidder she did not like, and the sale was called off. The halter was not restraint. It was notation, the visible sign that transferred a legal fiction from one man to another, in a language everybody in that marketplace could read. None of it was lawful. Magistrates who bothered to look at it said so. But hundreds of these sales were reported in the English press across a century and a half, and after them, both parties simply carried on, remarried, had children, were buried under their new names, and nobody in the parish thought anything of it. Thomas Hardy opens The Mayor of Casterbridge with a man selling his wife at a country fair. He did not need to explain the scene to his readers in 1886. They knew. Parliament had made divorce available to about 300 people. Everybody else went to the market and bought a rope.
The last story is different because it has not ended. Around the city of Valencia, on the Spanish Mediterranean coast,
lies an enormous irrigated plain, the Huerta. It is fed by a network of canals drawing from the river Turia, some of them dug more than 1,000 years ago under Muslim rule. Water in a dry country is the most reliable source of conflict there is. Your neighbour opens his sluice too long. Somebody upstream takes more than his share. A channel is left blocked or broken or dirty. Every Thursday at 12 o'clock, 8 men in black smocks carry a set of leather and wood armchairs out onto the pavement in front of the Gate of the Apostles at the Cathedral of Valencia. They arrange the chairs in a circle. They sit down. When the cathedral bell finishes striking noon, the session opens. They are farmers. Each of them represents one of the ancient irrigation canals, and each is elected by the very people he judges. There are no lawyers. The hearing is entirely oral. Nothing is filed, nothing is stamped. A bailiff calls the name of the man accused. He steps forward. He is asked what happened. He answers. The other party answers. The 8 men consult briefly in Valencian. Then the sentence is given out loud, and it is final. There is no appeal, not to a higher court, not to a regional authority, not to Madrid. If there are no cases, the session lasts a couple of minutes and everyone goes home. The same 8 chairs have been carried out every week through the Kingdom of Aragon, the Spanish Empire, the Napoleonic invasion, 2 Carlist wars, a republic, a civil war, 40 years of dictatorship, and the Constitution of 1978. It happens in the rain. It happens in August. If Thursday is a public holiday, they do it on Wednesday. In 2009, UNESCO put it on the list of intangible cultural heritage, which is the sort of thing that usually happens to a tradition just after it has stopped being useful. This one has not stopped being useful. It settles real disputes between real farmers about real water, and it settles them in about 10 minutes. There are tourists now. They stand in a ring around the chairs with their phones up, filming 8 elderly men in black smocks, deciding whether somebody left a sluice gate open. The farmers do not appear to mind. They have been doing this since before the phones, and before the tourists, and before Spain. 4 courts. 25 centuries. A city that could exile a man without accusing him of anything. A village that owned no law books and enforced its rules with cooking pots. A country that priced divorce out of reach and got a rope in the marketplace instead. And a plain outside Valencia where the water still gets shared out on Thursdays at noon by men who write nothing down. What emerged was rarely fair. The Charivari punished women far more often than men. The market sales borrowed the language of property to dissolve a marriage that the law would not. The Athenians exiled a man for the crime of being admired. But it is never nothing. It is always a procedure, with rules and witnesses and a moment when the matter is declared closed. Anacharsis laughed because he believed laws only trapped the weak. 25 centuries later, what is striking is not only that he was partly right, it is what people built wherever the law failed. Every society ends up with 2 sets of laws. One of them is printed. The other one is the reason your neighbours stop speaking to you, and nobody can tell you which statute you broke. If you enjoyed this episode of Risto's History Rhymes, please consider subscribing wherever you listen and sharing the episode with someone who might enjoy it. Until next time,